So recently, I've come to the conclusion that the best thing that we can do for Ashes of Creation, from a content creation and just the MMORPG community at large, is to be an anti-hype squad. Now, it's important to say for now, because at some point, when Ashes of Creation gets closer and closer to its actual launch date, I think that can shift. I think we can actually start to look at the positives and negatives and start to really talk about the game in more detail. But right now, in 2022, when I'm sitting down to film this, there presents a problem that is already kind of arising, and you're starting to see it in a weird and negative way online. And it's kind of this frustration and anger that is starting to kind of build up against the game. Now, I think that will subside. I think when we start to actually get a release date, which right now, by just my random ass estimates, you don't need to take it for fact, I would say that Ashes feels like it's at least 2 years away from release, and I would love to be wrong. I would love it if they were able to drop this game and it being ready, as soon as possible, because on paper alone, Ashes of Creation sounds like the dream MMORPG that we've long waited for. And I think that's what's actually leading to this interesting conflict of opinion. Because one of the things I do see is that within any game, you can take any game as a service, long running game. You're going to have players, you're going to have gamers who spend a lot of time with that game, that they love that game, that they've played that game. And ultimately, they're going to get frustrated with that game. It's a natural aspect. That's why I really enjoy games that let you take breaks without feeling like you're falling behind or being punished for that. Final Fantasy XIV is perhaps the best highlight and example of that in our modern society. Now, even saying that, note that there are plenty of people out there that feel like these games should require more investment, that they don't want to take breaks, that they're really looking for either an experience that they had long ago, or they're really looking forward to that kind of full-on, all-in experience in a modern game, in a modern MMORPG. And I'm using the term modern. You can always substitute that with anything that you like. So all that being said is that what I see with even the AOSC defenders, the Ashes of Creation, like diehards that do pop up in a comment here and there, I worry and wonder if they're actually going to make it to launch and actually still be in that positive way, or if they're going to make it to launch and realize, like, at some point, like, oh my gosh, like, this isn't everything that it cracked up to be. When I look at, like, Square Enix, to use as an example, something that I follow very closely, is the 10-year project to a game that doesn't ever live up to the hype. And so whenever a game takes 10 years to develop, note that there's a big problem there. There's a lot of effort. Now, MMOs take a long time to make, and that's one of the reasons why I think we're continuing to see less and less. But Ashes of Creation, Pantheon, some of the other things, Blue Protocol, might be the change in that, might see a new era, a new generation of vying for something to invite players out of Battle Royale and maybe into something a little bit more meaty and a little bit more, I don't know, just a deeper, richer experience. Now, I'm not trying to insult people who like Battle Royales. I actually enjoy them from time to time, but just note that we can always clearly see that, like, in terms of numbers and popularity, and Minecraft, hell, it's still like number one. I've never played Minecraft, and yet it's still like constantly in my feed for some random reason, or at least constantly on trending. Maybe they know I got kids or something. Who knows? Algorithms, man, they're smart. Anyhow, but I'm talking about, like, the idea of getting to the point where Ashes can be hyped. Now, I could give some room in terms of the argument that says that it would be good to hype the game, or it's good to talk about the game, which I'm not going to disagree with, like, having the conversation, but ideally having, like, a real honest conversation about the state of MMOs in the relation of Ashes and its development. That's something that I'm generally curious and interested about. But when it comes to the fact of how it's funded, Ashes of Creation, having not yet released, has stated multiple times that they have enough funding and they're good on money. But what they're doing is a part of their pre-order campaign, being able to sell, like, early access to an alpha, which, for those of you who are just curious, like, early access to an alpha is kind of neat if you're a real impassioned fan to say, hey, I was in the alpha. But I've seen people even kick back from those who went and played the alpha. They're like, oh, there's not really a game there. Like, you're really testing kind of core underlying systems. You're not ultimately testing the, what's going to end up being the end product. So that's just generally speaking, like, I wouldn't, for me personally, want to pay for an alpha, but they're raising money that way. So like the counter argument to my worldview here is that you want to continue to support the game and you want to fund it. And again, like I said, like on paper, Ashes of Creation looks amazing. Like everything that they're kind of talking about looks amazing. And then the longtime MMO player looks at some of that and says, like, I think the people are going to struggle with some of these systems. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be bad. It doesn't mean that Ashes isn't going to just come out and dominate. But it does mean to me, when I look at the MMO landscape, is that I think hype in and of itself is going to lead it into the kind of anti-hype. And I'd rather anti-hype it today and kind of try to set expectations low so that when the game does launch, all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, they did it. Holy crap, I can't believe they pulled this off. Holy freaking smokes, look how amazing it is. Rather than, oh, it didn't do everything that I thought it would do since I've been excited about this game for insert X amount of time. It didn't, live up to the expectation, because I think that tends to kind of have this, downward momentum. Now, right now, with it, will Ashes be the exception? I just don't think it will be. I think Ashes is going to go through every standard MMO kind of hype cycle, and in this way, the death spiral. And then ultimately, do they pull out of a death spiral with constant updates and with communication? It's not always about launch. And I think there is this interesting mindset within that people are going to look at the launch. And I don't know how, once we get closer to launch, it can't be hyped. It can't, you can't be excited for a new MMO. That's almost what it means to be an MMO player nowadays. We're always kind of excited about the next big thing, and whatever that next big thing is, I think what we have to do is that the next big thing isn't going to come out and then continue to grow. I think the new MMO is going to come out, it's going to dip, and then it's going to put in the work, and then it's going to continue to grow over the course of years, if not a decade or something like that. So the question ends up being is that how can we best manage it? And this is something I've been asking myself. The reason I want to sit down and talk to you guys today about it is how do I best manage my expectations for this game. But the best news is we do not have a release date. We're already halfway through 2022. I think that means that ultimately they're definitely not going to do a surprise announcement for the fall. I wouldn't want to launch a new MMO in the fall at all. But rather than start to look at 2023 and 2024 with the idea of it's absolutely perfectly fine to root for this game and hope that it knocks it out of the park and it is successful and exciting. Now, meanwhile, in all of this, I mentioned a couple of MMOs. You also in the shadows kind of have the Riot MMO that is off there in the corner, which we know barely nothing, if at all, about, and we don't know if it'll ever manifest. But there's also kind of an interesting hope for that. But they've said something interesting too. Like everything, sounds good on paper, but in practice, I think we kind of have, it's kind of like what people say versus what people do. It could be wildly different, And when it comes to like, even with Riot's MMO, them saying that if you want to play a single player game, go play a single player game. We're making an MMO. If they go so far as to really kind of enforce that multiplayer, I think that's going to strengthen. That's going to strengthen the community itself, but that might have that tendency to turn people off who don't want that experience or who don't have that time to commit to it. So again, we know nothing about that. Honestly, we know, I would hesitate to say how much we really know about, Ashes. We know what their goals are, what their ambitions are, and we know that they feel confident in not wanting to rush it, right? Like I think if Ashes right now was being built by a big publisher, it would be one of those things where, hey, we're going to go ahead and release it, as soon as we feel like the core game is there, and then eventually when these other systems that we talked about come online, then we'll go ahead and release that. I do feel like they're going to wait up to a point where all of those systems are working well and are integrated. But again, we don't know. We can only trust. We can only hope. And, it's going to be an interesting journey. So that's just kind of some thoughts that I've been having on Ashes of Creation. I hope that you guys enjoyed them, me putting them out here for you guys today. Lots of stuff coming up next week with the 23rd. I was thinking about making a Guild Wars 2 video talking about some things, but maybe. We'll see if we get that posted. But anyway, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. Hopefully I'll see you next time. But until then, take care.
Yeah. It's time to chill out on the couch and read some comments. That's right. You know me when it comes to Destiny. I'm off with the clan, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh yeah.